Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the Bears beat reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, and he's covered Chicago sports for 30-plus years. Please welcome Mark Potash to the program. Mark, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. Second time. Really excited to have you on. What did you make of the Bears draft, first off?
Well, I thought it was very prudent. It kind of is consistent with Ryan Poles. You know, he's kind of doing this his own way. And if it's very hard to differentiate the excitement that you have of the newness of Poles from the excitement we felt for Ryan Pace 7 years ago. And I think one way I think you can do that is to see where Poles might have a better chances. He just seems, like I said, a little more prudent, a little more just doing things his way and being really true to what he wanted to do. And I think this draft, the first two, with all the excitement about trying to get a receiver and the obvious need to get a receiver, he resisted that temptation and took two defensive backs, which I admit I was not really big on that once upon a time when at the height of the Fangio defense. I felt like, if you're good up front, you can make good defensive backs. I disagree with them. I totally changed it now after seeing last year when they had led the league in sacks and also in touchdown passes allowed. I totally agree with the idea of fortifying that secondary. Definitely needed it. And I thought that was a really smart move. So I think he's really, I think that's just one area where I think you can say, hey, this guy might, if you want to make the case that, a lot of times it's silly to me that the same excitement you feel about Poles is the same excitement you felt about Pace. But I think there are very little things, subtle things that I think are indicators that, hey, I guess my point is, if he, and I know we're talking a little off track here, but if he gets success, he will have a better chance to sustain success. And I've seen enough instances where that can happen. And this draft, without having a first round pick, is one of those flags.
How do you feel about those two defensive picks? Do you think they make an impact right away for the Bears?
Well, I think they do. I'll be honest. I'm not a draft Nick. I don't know much about them at all. So I have no idea how good they will be. But just the fits seem good. And also they are being introduced into a defense where everyone else is being introduced into a defense. So they are learning from scratch, which is almost an advantage. And I think that also kind of portends to their early impact. Frankly, I think Brisker, for some reason, just what I've read about Brisker, what I know about him, most people think that Gordon will be the better player, the more skilled player. I think Brisker is the one to watch. I think he can have on that defense, with the way they use that safety in the box, deeper in the field, in pass protection, in pass defense. I think every way. I think Brisker has a chance to make really the bigger impact. But I think they both will. I think they're both destined to start. And I think that, and I think that, like I said, I think it's a good start. Who knows how good their defense will be, but I think that's a good way to start. I totally approve of that.
We all know about the wide receiving need, but did you think that this was a responsible move by Ryan Poles to go through the secondary? That was a big hope for the Bears last year, too.
As far as, not reaching for a receiver, well, right. It was kind of too bad that they didn't have the first round pick, because that's where you need to get the wide receiver. Timing is everything. Look at Pace. If Pace has 3 picks higher, he gets Amari Cooper and not Kevin White. That makes a big difference for the Bears. Bigger difference than you think, to tell you the truth. Timing is everything. And this was the draft to get a wide receiver early, but after that run, maybe not. So you kind of trust his judgment there. Yeah, they do have issues, and they actually, if you want to criticize Poles, he kind of reached for Velus Jones, because that guy was the consensus was that he would be drafted in the 150s, and he or beyond 100. I know that, and of most mock drafts or analysts. And he was taken 71st. Now, who knows who's right on that? But the point is, you can make the argument that he did reach for that, and definitely Velus Jones. His numbers, his college numbers, are the same as Javon Wims, who was a 7th round pick who busted and did not work out with the Bears. Now, they're not the same prospect. I'm just saying it's not like he got one of those receivers with 1,000 yards, from Alabama or LSU or whatever, and got. So I think you can argue that was a little bit of a reach. But again, in a new offense where he's learning with everybody else, I think everybody's got a chance. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I can't say I'm sold on that. I don't know enough about the receiver or the with the Bears off. There's just too many unknowns to predict what's going to happen. I just think the idea of if you're going to reach in the third round, not the first or second. I think that's a good tack.
Do you think they did enough to help out Justin Fields in this draft?
Well, that's the big question. Everybody wants to. It's a fair question. It's a good question. My personal feeling is they're putting everything on Luke Getsy. It's his job to get receivers open, protect the quarterback, and design an offense that works no matter who the receivers are. Would they be better off if they had a go-to guy like an Allen Robinson? I think absolutely. I think that's the one safety valve every quarterback needs or develops. On the other hand, if this offense is good enough that he will develop that relationship with a Darnell Mooney, maybe a Byron Pringle, I don't know, that's wishful thinking, but Mooney definitely fits that bill. As far as a guy who could be a go-to number one receiver. A lot of these go-to guys were not go-to guys when they came into good offenses, but they had a good quarterback, a good offense, and they became that. A lot of these guys are second and third round draft picks, these very best receivers, Davante Adams, being one of them. So I think I'll be honest, I'm not as crazy about that or concerned about that, because I think they're putting their trust in the offense. And also I will say this, I keep saying it, but not to disparage Matt Nagy any more than anyone else has, but we are all scarred by how bad that offense was. And I think that has colored everybody's vision of what the players are and how good they are. We've seen, I think I said the last time there, we've seen the worst version of everybody in that offense. And so let's see what happens when you get somebody who maybe can design an offense that creates the conflict of assignment, gets receivers open without them having short area quickness. That happens. Slower receivers get open in good offenses. I'm saying? Just the way they're designed. And I guess my point is they're putting all their faith in Luke Getsy to make an offense. In fact, I asked Luke, I asked him that very question. Everybody's nervous about this wide receiver core. What do you think? And he said, well, Davante Adams wasn't Davante Adams until he became Davante Adams. And I think it's a good point. And the point is, just what I said, you can a good offense will make receivers and they have a good quarterback. They're not hoping. This is Justin Fields. This is a guy who no guarantees, but should be good. They're in the right starting point for them to have a good enough offense, to your original question, for Justin Fields to develop. Frankly, that's not a concern of mine. And a lot of it is a little bit of blind faith in that a GM with an offensive line background, he's gonna set his quarterback and let his quarterback hang him out to dry like that with a bad offensive line. I don't think so. You're trusting his judgment. So I think on that, on the protection front and on the weapons front, I just think you got to put your faith in Luke Getsy and Ryan Poles that they got the right guys, and we'll see. So I know I didn't really answer the question, but that's where we are. A lot of unknowns, and so I'm not gonna say that they're setting him up to fail when I think they still have a process by which he can succeed. I don't think they're being negligent. I guess that's my point.
How close is Darnell Mooney to becoming a bona fide number one wide receiver? What's he still need to do?
I think he needs to be in a better offense. I'll be honest. I think he shows every for a fifth round draft pick. Now, I think he does probably have a lower ceiling than maybe some people think, to tell you the truth, because I think that, again, the same thing, just like you're scarred by a bad offense, when somebody does excel, you think they're better than they are. So, I don't think he's going to be Tyreek Hill, or that kind of guy. But and I don't know if he'll ever be that number one receiver, to tell you the truth, that number one go-to guy. I just see him as being very, very productive in a good offense because he's so versatile. He learns well. He understands the position. He understands the nuances of what it takes to be a good receiver. In an Andy Reid offense, he's a really productive player because, but he was in just the opposite. So I'm not sure exactly technically what he has to do, because I think he has everything. He can run short routes. He can catch the ball and run. He can go deep. He can be that guy who's wide open when Justin Fields is scrambling around like crazy, like Patrick Mahomes is. He'll be that guy who's wide open in the end zone, and he's got the speed to do that, but he's also got the speed to take a short pass and turn it into a big play, which Hill does. So I technically I really can't answer that question because I just don't know enough about the position. All I'm saying is in the right position, he can be a number one guy, but I just don't know. there are different levels of number one guys, So I think he'd be good. I can think he'd be good enough, but I think he, no matter how good he is, I think it'll still leave Bears fans wanting more and wanting another guy to develop. You'll definitely need another number one guy, I think, with him.
Do you think anybody on this roster today could be that second number one guy, or not really?
I don't see anything, who knows. It's hard. That's a hard question to answer, because it's just like, depending on how good a good quarterback can make almost anybody a really productive guy. Daz Newsome in the right offense can be a really productive guy. I've seen enough of film on him to know that that he could be that guy. But I'll be honest, I could never predict that. And this is a very I've called it, the word I keep coming back to with the Bears roster is not a script. And that's not to disparage them. They're not bad. They're just not known. They're not proven. We just don't know anything about them. And that's the whole roster just about, but particularly for the wide receiver core. So it's hard to give you a non-answer, but I can't pick anybody right now. Byron Pringle was really good with Patrick Mahomes. He could be less productive in this. They probably will be less productive in this offense. Just like St. Brown or any of these guys who stick. So that, I guess what I'm saying is just a huge X factor. We just really don't know. And it's all, and I keep coming back and say, it's all on the offense. It's all on the quarterback. How do they develop the quarterback? The offense is going to have to make the weapons right at this point. That's what they're counting on. That's their whole thing. And, we'll see if they're right. But again, they've got a good year. This is a totally different subject, but they've given themselves kind of a free year to find all these things out. And then next offseason, when they have the money and when they have draft capital and then with a first round pick and they have more salary cap room, then they can go and then they'll know what they have. But they're not. I think that's kind of a point I made in my story today in the paper, is that one thing that Poles did Poles did not do that Pace did was he didn't sign some name guy just to give you a name guy. He didn't sign an Antrell Roll. He didn't sign an Eddie Royal, somebody who kind of gives you a name. Hey, this guy's produced, and really all those guys did what they got in the way of developing players. And so he's to me, he's like almost a whole year ahead of Pace as far as clearing out the roster and giving himself this year to figure out what it is. And then next year we can ask a lot of these questions. Will be a lot better a year from now, to tell you the truth, not to beg off the question, but the fact of the matter is this is kind of a free year for them. And then they've done that by trading Matt, not signing Hicks, getting rid of Goldman, cleaning out the roster. Right move, wrong move. I can't say. To me, it seems like I'll go back to the same thing I said at the beginning. Prudent. It seems like it's the right move, but also it gives you, it puts you in a totally developmental year, and that's frankly that's what the Bears need. They need a restart.
Mark Potash here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, how big of a jump do you expect out of Justin Fields come next year?
Well, it all depends on the offense, but if it is, I expect a big jump. If they protect him, and if they give him, and if they develop him, this is all on development. And I think that's one thing we saw last year is he wasn't going to carry a bad offense. He won't make a bad offense good, but I think he'll make a good offense great. I think he's good enough to do that. And so we'll see. And again, I go back to the same thing. If this offense can do it. Now, remember, we had very high hopes for Matt Nagy when he came in the offense. Now, I think now that we've seen over time, you can argue that Luke Getz, even though he was only a quarterbacks coach / passing game coordinator, he might actually have better credentials. And even though he also had Aaron Rodgers, he might actually have better credentials than kind of being Andy Reid's right-hand man. You know what I'm saying? We never really knew exactly how much Matt Nagy had to do with that offense. And I just sense, and again, maybe I'm getting caught up in the wishful thinking, but I just sense from everything I've heard and talking to Getsy is that he was much more integral to their success than maybe Nagy was in Kansas City. So same situation. You're hoping for a new guy to bring to invigorate an offense with design. And I have a little better hope that he can do it, but I had hope that Nagy could do it too. So I can't, that's where we are.
What's going to be your criteria in judging Fields' progress next year? Are you going to look at numbers or the eye test? What are you going to do?
I just want to see how well he improves, how well he learns. This is all a learning process. You need players who learn well. Like I said, Fields is not a magician. He was not, except for the one play against San Francisco. He was not going to do this totally on his own, no matter how bad the offense was. And so Yeah, it's a good question. I really haven't really thought about it, so I don't have a good answer for you. But I just want to see him improve. I want to see him make a mistake and then not make a mistake. I want to see him improvise. I want to see him make plays that even Luke Getsy doesn't have designed in the offense. I want to see how well he can make a play. But my biggest thing is with almost any superior athlete is how well do they learn, and I think that's the key. And there are different ways of doing that. But I think improvisation. I think eliminating mistakes, turning nothing into something, and keeping your head downfield, finding I guess I want to see him find the open guy late. Trubisky could not do that. How many times did you see somebody post a screenshot on Twitter of some guy wide open? And sometimes they were misleading, but sometimes they weren't, where a guy was wide open and Mitch was so locked into one play or another. He was just so mechanical that he couldn't find him. I want to see in this offense, almost in any offense, especially in this offense, I want to see Justin Fields find the open guy late. That would be my number one thing.
How ugly do you expect next year to be? Is there a possibility that it doesn't go as planned? No, it's going to be a first-year offense.
The only way it's ugly is if Justin Fields gets hurt or just doesn't develop. And other than that, like I said, it's a free year. You've got a playable schedule that I think the Bears will want to play like 3 years from now. That they will really think, hey, I said this is a schedule that a good team would really want. And so they, which is okay. It's fine. I mean, they could surprise. I always say never underestimate the mediocrity of the NFL. I've said that for years. You never know. You catch the Packers when they're on the way down, like most winning Bear teams have done. That's why they win, is because the Packers are done. You catch them, Devontae Adams leaves. Who knows how that, coaches leave. They've tried to keep Aaron Rodgers happy. Maybe this is the breaking point. I know we've said that for many years, so I'm not counting on that. But I'm saying that happens. You've got the Lions still rebuilding, and I think they're a team to watch. I think they get it now, and the Vikings are kind of a half step ahead of the Bears, where they have a better roster, but they're also kind of rebuilding and restarting. And so there's nothing, except for the Packers. Unless the Packers are status quo, there's nothing that is that prohibitive from them being a surprise team. So I don't think it's going to get that ugly, to tell you the truth, unless these guys are like totally incompetent and we're being totally fooled again. I think this is a playable schedule. I think he is in a best position possible, where he has a fresh start on offense and defense, instead of this herky-jerky thing where you've got a really great offense and a totally developing, a really great defense, totally developing offense, or you've got Jay Cutler instead of a Jay Cutler you can't win with, instead of a developing quarterback. And then I think that's those have been kind of impediments to progress under Fox and Trestman and Nagy. And I think they've got this is clean. This is a clean rebuild. And I think this gives them a better chance to maybe be better than people think. I'm not guaranteeing, but what I'm saying is, to your original question is, hey, they can win 3 games and it might not be ugly. I wrote about today about what I call the sweet spot of bad. That's what they're looking for. And that's where you play poorly. You lose games, but you keep your quarterback upright, and you develop your quarterback. And that gives you a high draft pick and a developing quarterback, a developing offense. I said the supreme example is the 98 Colts. They had a first number 1 overall pick in Peyton Manning. They won 3 games, but he was sacked only 22 times, the second lowest in the league. And even then he was not a mobile quarterback. That's pretty good. And he developed, and that gave them the 4th pick in the draft, which they used for Edgerrin James, future Hall of Famer, and they were off and running. That's how you do it. And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, because it's a little cherry picking, but that's an example of what the sweet spot of bad is. That's which are going to be a bad team. It doesn't always have to be ugly. And I think that's an important thing for the Bears is to just make progress even when you're not winning games. So anyway, that I just think that's where they are as far as when you say getting ugly. I think the key is to even if you're not winning games, to prevent it from being ugly, and we'll see. I mean, we don't know anything about this offensive line, but like I said, I will be totally mystified why Poles would leave his offensive line in a lurch like that when he's an offensive line guy. That's his thing. So you got to believe that they're going to be able to do that. So I don't know how ugly it can get. I've been a Bears fan for long enough, and I've covered the Bears long enough that I know it can get pretty ugly. But I just think they're in a good spot for, like I said, a clean rebuild for them to avoid that.
Well, their schedule is pretty favorable, too, based on what we've seen come out based on the past years. I mean, is there a possibility even for above 500 record or a playoff appearance based on how everybody else does with this schedule?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And the schedule allows for it. Now, the schedule can be very deceiving because I remember when I first covered the Bears in the 90s, there was a couple of years where I think they had, when you looked at the schedule and the strength of schedule based on the previous year's record, it was one of the toughest schedules in the league, and it ended up being one of the easiest, or flip flop, or the other way around. But it was from one extreme to the other because teams, there are 5 or 6 teams that go from 4 or 5 wins to the playoffs every year on average. I looked it up. There are at least 4 or 5 teams every year that didn't make the playoffs or were under 500 and then made the playoffs. So you don't know if you're going to be that team or if anyone else is. But so you can't really go. It's hard to go by the schedule. On paper, though, the schedule looks very playable. And if the Bears, but the Bears are one of those teams that everybody else is saying, hey, we only have to play the Bears. The Bears are a playable team for everybody else. So, everybody else is picking the Bears when they do their win, loss. The Bear game, I looked it up. Everybody's picking the Bear game to be their team's win. Even the Falcons and the Texans, believe it or not, and the Lions and the Vikings. Everybody's got the Bears as their win. Well, maybe the Bears are going to be, who is, but that's what the NFL is all about. Like I said, never underestimate the mediocrity of the NFL. Are you a part of it, or do you benefit by it? And that's always the ongoing question. So to answer your question, which I think it was if they were a surprise team and challenged for a playoff spot, that's not a bad way to. I mean, yeah, if they get caught in that no man's land where they don't get a good draft pick and don't make the playoffs, that's not as damaging now. You can still find a good player, but they could be a surprise contender. We have no idea what these guys can do on offense or defense. It's a total, to me, it's a total X factor. And so I really don't know. But yeah, can they be? I'm not saying they're destined to be a 3-win team. It just looks that way. When you look at the and that's an interesting thing. I kind of wrote about that too earlier the last week or so. Is when you look at the subtractions and additions. When you look at Mack, Hicks, Goldman, James Daniels, your best lineman, you let him go. Allen Robinson, and then you look at the additions, the rookies. Brisker, Gordon, Velus Jones. Again, nondescript free agents, Justin Jones, Lucas Patrick. When you look at the pluses and the Bears have a worse roster today than they had when Ryan Pace was fired. I mean, on paper, they do. They have a worse roster, but they have more room for growth. And that's the unknown factor I'm talking about that we just don't know. So it's kind of an interesting situation where the Bears went 5-6-11 last year. They have a worse roster. They could end up with a better record.
How are you going to judge Ryan Poles next year and in the years to come?
Well, I want to see. I guess I want to see how he uses what he should have. The greater salary cap space and draft capital, and see what he attacks. I want to see what he attacks when he really is going for it. This year he was just cleaning house. I mean, obviously his biggest free agent was Larry Ogunjobi, who didn't even sign. And Larry Ogunjobi was like the most proven guy, but he was lower. He would be a lower level free agent in previous. He was worse, not worse, but he was lower profile than Pernell McPhee, right? That was Pace's first guy. But anyway, they didn't even get him. So I mean, this was just totally cleaning house, and so. It's a new ball game next year. So you're almost rejudging him. And this could look even more prescient as a strategy next year if he, depending on how he uses, does he go for it? And remember, with all this cap space that he's got, a lot of people, you say you can't buy your way into success, and that's true. But a lot of this cap space theoretically will be used to sign Jalen Johnson, to sign Darnell Mooney. Theoretically, if those guys take a big jump in this offense, they're going to be guys you want to re-sign. So it's not so much getting part of it is going to be getting the top tier free agents, 1 or 2 next year. Will he be able to do that? But it's also does he pay the right guys? Pace started out doing that at the end with Eddie Jackson. He did not. But at the beginning, when he re-signed Hicks, he re-signed Goldman. He got a lot of bang for his buck. Those are really, but everything changed, and that brings on, not to go on too long here, but that brings on a whole nother thing: is no matter how good he is now, how much will he be able to sustain it? Because the tendency is for people to get kind of enveloped by the dysfunction at Hallis Hall, and they just become a lesser version of themselves as they go on. That's been the history. So again, we don't know. But to answer your question, well, I'll be looking to see just how well he takes it. How well does he do as far as his strategy? He wants to see what he's got now, including the quarterback. He wants to see what he's got. It's like next year is like his rookie year all over again, as far as I'm concerned, because it's a totally different ball game. Now he's trying to actually build a winner instead of just getting the pieces in place.
You didn't mention David Montgomery as far as people who could get re-signed.
Yeah, just because I keep forgetting about David Montgomery.
Do you think that ends up happening? Or?
Absolutely. In this offense, he could be a big factor. Although I sense in this offense, it might be almost like the Green Bay thing where they get two kind of star running backs. So it might not be like he's like the 1,200-yard rusher you have to sign or whatever. He could actually. It could be one of those things where one of them is expendable. Could be Khalil Herbert, could be him. So I guess maybe I didn't mention him because I just don't see him as necessary at a high level as a receiver, let's say, or something like that. But yeah, no, absolutely, he's another guy you might need to re-sign. I like him. He's a good player. He's a guy who succeeded in a bad offense. So he would definitely be a candidate. Another one of those breakout guys like Mooney and Jalen Johnson to be re-signed. Absolutely.
Mark Potash, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, Twitter. Why do you troll on there? I want to hear the story.
Oh, I don't know. Just because I'm a jerk, I guess. I can't. I don't know. It's just fun. I haven't really thought about it. A lot of people talk about it and stuff. Yeah, I'm just joking around. To me, it's a playground. It's like the playground. You get in fights. You have fun. You play silly games, and that's what it is to me. It's fun watching a game on Twitter, like when you're watching a game and commenting and stuff like that. The only problem, of course, now is that, it just gets a little too over the top. And sometimes I regret, there's many times I regret, I delete a lot of things and stuff like that. Cause like everybody else, I do things half cocked and it turns bad and stuff like that. But I don't know. I guess it's a weird thing because I'm 63 years old. I really have zero grasp of modern technology, including computers. It's a miracle that I figured out this Zoom thing just to be on here. But I can kind of, I can kind of figure it out. So I kind of have an idea how to do Twitter, but not really. So it's a little dangerous, sometimes. So, but anyway, yeah, it's all in fun, but it's hard to get all in fun expressed in a tweet, especially when it goes. That's the other thing I did get about Twitter. When I'm on Twitter, I feel like I'm talking to a bunch of friends and I don't realize, like a little group of guys that, do a bunch of grab ass and, stuff like that, just having fun, but that's the way I see it in my mind. But I don't realize that when you tweet something, even if it's just to people who follow you, it can go all over the place. It goes to people who don't get your sense of humor. And so that's why when people come back at me, I never really try and engage. I definitely don't if it's somebody who just didn't get it, because I don't blame them. I see things on Twitter, I go crazy over it. Oh, I didn't realize the guy was just kidding, so I do that too. So yeah, I'm not real comfortable with it, to tell you the truth. I enjoy it. It's fun. I get a kick out of it, but it's just me being like 17 again. So the older you get, the more you really embrace that kind of thing.
What's the biggest regret you've had by putting something on Twitter?
I'd have to think about that. I'm really bad at that, but there have been times there was, oh man, I can't think of it. I wish I was prepared for this question, because there was a couple weeks ago, there was a time where, I know what it was. I had made a point, and I made a point, which I think was a good point. And it was a nuanced point about the NBA playoffs. It was when Chris Middleton got hurt and Bobby Portis got hurt in that game against the Bulls that they lost. And it looked like it had turned the series. If Portis is out also with Middleton, the Bulls were the better team in that game and looked like they might actually win the series. And so I was just pointing out that last year, the Suns and Bucks both benefited because they were the healthiest teams at the end. In other words, Chris Paul got hurt in the conference finals, but he was there for the finals. He got him there. And Giannis got hurt in an earlier round, but he was there at the end. And the healthiest teams were the ones that were alive. In other words, if Anthony Davis doesn't get hurt, if Kawhi Leonard doesn't get hurt, if Jaylen Brown, I think it was, doesn't get hurt for Boston, if James Harden doesn't get hurt, I don't think the Suns and the Bucks would have been in the final. That's just my opinion. I think the Lakers would have won, and I think the Nets would have won. Well, anyway, I was just making the point that I said they were the healthiest teams at the end, and I got all sorts of blowback because people knew that Giannis got hurt. How can you? It sounded like a stupid tweet, but the point was, and I just didn't have the time to explain it. The point was the two teams that were healthiest at the end were the teams that benefited. So I think it was a good point, and I think you're seeing it. Both teams got knocked out in the second round. One because one of their players got hurt, and the other because the other team's best player, Doncic, didn't get hurt. Nobody else. The health is a big factor. So anyway, I think my point was right, but I deleted it. I got such blowback from it, and they were right in the context they were seeing it in. So that's not one of those things where you do like you're going to get fired or something like that. But that was it was a bad tweet because it was nuanced and I didn't have time to explain. I still think my point is well taken. I'll be honest. I think the health was. I think the Suns and Bucks last year were beneficiaries of good fortune and not to disparage them. The Bucks won it and the Suns got to the final. But I think that was a big factor. I think we've seen, not to belabor this, but I think we've seen in the playoffs as opposed to in my era of the 80s Hall of Famers, you're seeing many more superstars get hurt in the game now. Guys hardly ever missed time. Jordan never got hurt. Karl Malone never got hurt. Guys, Magic Johnson never got hurt. Larry Bird until the end never got. These guys just never missed games. Now they do, so it's a bigger factor now. Anyway, I'm going on. The question was, do I regret anything? I regret. That's when I regret because the people who were blowing back at me were right in the context they were seeing it, and I felt bad about that. But again, it was a nuanced point. I should have, I didn't. That's my biggest. Sorry to go on like that, but that's my biggest thing with Twitter is that the best thing for me on Twitter is when they went from 140 to 200. Is that when it was 140? I can't make points very well. I need but 280. But sometimes you need even more than 280, and I haven't quite figured out the whole thread thing, so I couldn't explain myself. So I regretted that, but again, sorry. But anyway, hopefully that answered your question.
That was a great job of answering the question. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. Best wishes covering this Bears team and looking forward to catching up very soon once again.
John, thanks a lot. Congratulations on all your success and your show and everything you're doing. You do a great job. I love it. And anytime you want to talk Bears or any sports, just give me a call.